You state your name and position before you went to the UK?
Sure. What is this for?
This is for Capp Speech. I'm doing a persuasive speech on the Boys and Girls Brigade.
Okay. All right. Well, prior to moving to the UK in September of 2016, I was a program leader at the Boys and Girls Brigade in Neenah. I started in that position in 2009, so I worked there for about 7 years. There you go.
And what do you do? What is your position at the UK Brigade?
I'm the program. I have two positions. I'm the program director for the Whittam Boys Brigade and Girls Association there. So they kind of switch the titles around a little bit.
All right.
And then I also work half-time for the Boys Brigade London District.
I see.
So the Whittam Brigade is about 100 boys and girls.
Okay.
And 30 leaders, 30 volunteer leaders. And the London District Boys Brigade is 2,300 young people and 806 adult volunteers.
All right. And what sets the UK Brigade apart from the Australian or the US Brigade?
What sets it apart? Apart from, there's, I guess you would say, some cosmetic things. For starters, the brigade started in the United Kingdom, so it was founded in Glasgow, Scotland in 1883.
All right.
So I guess you could say it's kind of the world headquarters of brigade. It's where it originated. Mm-hmm. And the headquarters has since moved from Glasgow, where it was for the first 75 or 80 years of its existence, to London, where it sits now. So
you said 75 years. So around what time did the brigade start?
So brigade started in Glasgow, Scotland, on October 4th of 1883. So that was just a little over 135 years ago.
All right.
So it started there as one boys brigade company, and then within 10 years it had spread all the way to the United States, all the way to Australia, and all the way to, all kinds of places. And the fastest growing brigades right now are in Asia.
Asia? So there are brigades in Asia.
Yep. There are brigades in every country in the world that used to be part of the British Empire. That'd be a good way to look at it.
Because I was looking on the Wikipedia. I know Wikipedia's not the most accurate thing, but I looked on it and I was surprised to see that there were a lot of brigades in like Africa and Asia and that.
The fastest growing brigade organization is in Asia. Mm-hmm. So Indonesia, Malaysia, Hong Kong, and places like that. Right. And there's actually 2 or 3 brigade companies that are operating in China as well, that have migrated there kind of from Hong Kong. And there's one brigade company that's been operating in China for decades and decades and decades. But they, obviously with all of the restrictions and stuff on there, they have to be very, very careful about how they operate. Mm-hmm. And then one of the significant differences is in the United States, when the brigade in Neenah was formed up in 1900, at that point there were 27,000 brigaders enrolled in brigade around the United States alone. And these days, so one of the things that happened is in World War I, at the start of World War I, a lot of brigade officers went off to fight in the war. And when the brigade companies didn't survive their departure, so a lot of times they came back and the brigade company had ceased to exist. Okay. So the U.S. brigades, most of them closed around 1917, 1918.
So how many brigades were there before World War I?
Brigade companies, there were probably several hundred, if not 1,000, boys brigade companies
around
in the United States.
Country.
Around the United States, yep. Okay. The oldest one was in Baltimore. The largest one was in San Francisco, and the most centrally located one was in Chicago. So when the brigade started here in Neenah, there was an organization that ran in Chicago called the United Boys Brigade of America, and they were the sanctioning organization. So if you wanted to be a brigade, you would start up your brigade and you would run for about a year, and then you would apply for membership in the UBBA. And then you became, at the end of that year, you became a full-fledged brigade company. So now, to this day and age, because one of the things involved in this is it's a volunteer position, but I'm the regional representative to the Global Fellowship for North America. So there are a few brigades in Canada.
Okay.
There's like 11 brigades in Canada. There are 3 in the United States that I'm aware of. There's the one here in Neenah.
Okay.
There's one in Brockton, Massachusetts, and one in Boston, Massachusetts.
And the ones in Boston are running still, or Massachusetts?
The ones in Massachusetts are actually relatively new. They've started up within the last 5 to 10 years.
Really?
Yep. And then there used to be 2 brigades in Baltimore, but I don't know of anybody that knows if they're operating anymore or not. I've tried to get a hold of them, but all of the phone numbers that have been listed and all of the websites have been taken down. So I suspect that they're probably not running anymore. But there were 2 in Baltimore, and they ran out of basically different churches. One of the most, like, I would say, significant differences between the brigade that you're familiar with and that you grew up in here is that this is essentially a community-based brigade in a dedicated building that runs outside of the local churches. It ran, for a large part of its history, it ran in conjunction with local churches, but it wasn't a part of the church program and the church youth work, whereas you would find most brigade companies around the world, not all, but most of them, would operate as out of a church. And the average brigade company in the world is about 20 to 30 boys or boys and girls big. And they run out of a specific church. So they run all of their programming out of various buildings. So like the brigade that I work for in London has 91 brigade companies all over the city of London. And all of them are attached to a church. So they're in neighborhoods all over the city.
So brigades around the world are not necessarily as big as ours, or do not have like a dedicated place as ours.
This is there are a few brigade companies, and there are, the structure is a little bit different too. Like we think of this as a brigade. The reality is it's really more like 8 brigade companies. It's almost like you have a boys company on Monday night and a girls company on Monday night. Because the founder of the brigade, William Smith, his idea was that no brigade company should be bigger than 100 boys, because that way the captain, or the guy that's leading the brigade company, knows all of them by name. So that was his idea, was that you keep the company small so that the people that are running the brigade can know all of the individual kids really well. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the brigade here in Neenah is really like in the UK, in the United Kingdom, where I live and work now. We get groups of like 8 or 9 brigades together, and we put them together in what we call a battalion. And in the battalion, they will organize like sporting competitions. They'll have football matches and track and field days and overnight camping trips and week-long camping trips and all of that stuff. So that tends to get organized at the battalion level, like we are here. So it just so happens that we have like 8 brigade companies operating under one roof in this building.
In the UK, do you guys ever like volunteer to help the UK community around there? Or do you like?
Do the brigades do like community service projects in the community? Yeah. You'll find in different every company is very autonomous, so they have the freedom to design and build and operate a program that works for them. In that community. So some brigade companies may do lots of community service, and some may do very little. But the brigade company that I work for in Whittam, in the town of Whittam, which is Witham, so you can look that up on Google or whatever, and look at Google Road pictures of it if you're interested. That brigade company, for the last 5 years, we've operated a community meeting room in a shopping center, like Fox Point, or you know what I mean, over by Subway and stuff, over by in Kentucky Fried Chicken. So there's like a strip mall like that, and we've got a unit in that we make available to the community for all different. We use it some, but then other groups use it as a meeting place, and we have pool table and video games and that kind of stuff in there that different different youth groups used, and we did that for 5 years. So that was a bit of our community service for the community that we live in.
All right. And
hold your thought for just a second.
Yeah.
The other significant difference, I would say, between the brigade here and the brigades probably just about everywhere else in the world is the brigade is a uniformed youth organization. So, as you see with the Australians that have been visiting the building the last few days, right?
Yes.
They're bedecked in a uniform with hats and all of that stuff. So, you'll find that just about every country you go to. And even similar organizations, like if you're familiar with it, there's the FDF in Denmark, which is the founder of the FDF in Denmark was very good friends with the founder of the Boys Brigade in Scotland. So they shared program ideas back and forth. So it's a very similar organization. It's just in Denmark it stands for Flurgende Flagert. It's completely unpronounceable, but there you have it. But if you're interested in that, you can type in FDF Denmark, and you get all kinds of information about the stuff that they do there as well.
Do you know if like Scotland has like an island like Onaways here, or probably not? I assume not.
Well, islands
Or a dedicated camping site.
Right. Yes. Yes. A lot of brigade companies do. The first Glasgow Boys Brigade, which is the very first company that ever got founded, is still in operation today, and they run a camp at a place called Tinnaburra in Scotland, and they have been camping there since I think 1886. So they have a dedicated campsite. It's rougher than what you would be familiar with in Ottawa. They do all like under canvas tents, and they have a small toilet, shower, kitchen facility there, but it's like 2 showers and 2 flush toilets, and then some stuff for a kitchen and whatnot.
So it's definitely not as big as Onaway.
Yeah, well, acreage it's probably larger.
But I mean, like facility-wise, like you don't have the mess hall or
you wouldn't have a lot of that facility. But one of the things that the UK Brigade has is because the Brigade of the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland is so it's actually 5 countries. You have England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and Ireland.
Right.
So you have all of those. You have those 5 countries that there's brigades in, and so in each of the largest regions. So the population, the number of kids enrolled in brigade is about 48,000 in the UK. So in the whole of the country, there's 48,000 brigaders and about 15,000 adult volunteer leaders. So in England, they have the national headquarters. Is in a building called Felden Lodge just outside of London, and that is a 130 bed residential facility. And then beside that, they have a massive green field that they do tent camping in and all of that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And set up event days. So that's both a residential facility and a training center and everything else. So like brigaders your age would be working on the highest award that you can get is called the Queen's Badge, and there's a bunch of requirements that you have to have met in brigade before you can start work on your Queen's Badge. And then once you start, the first thing you have to do with your Queen's Badge is take a skills course. So it's a day-long thing where they tell you what you have to do in order to help you understand all of the steps towards getting the Queen's Badge. And then before you can complete the Queen's Badge, you have a residential weekend. So you do Friday night, Saturday night at a residential facility. And then they have another one up in Scotland called Cairnvale House. So you can look those things up on the internet if you want. Cairnvale House is a very similar thing. It's an old country estate building that's been converted into bedrooms and conference rooms and that kind of stuff, and a camping field beside that. And then in Ireland, they have a house called Ganaway House. So it's a similar thing. Big old house, lots of sleeping spaces and bedrooms and showers and all of that kind of stuff in it, and then a massive camping field out beside it, because most of the camping that brigades do in the UK is like rugged outdoor tent camping.
And how is the Queen's Badge different from, I think our highest award is the Outstanding Brigader?
Right. So one I guess the best way to describe it, traditionally the Outstanding Brigader Award here is it's the one boy and the one girl that, in the eyes of the brigade staff, have accomplished the most in their 7 or 8 year brigade career. Whereas the Queen's Badge, the award structure in the UK is you work through the younger brigader award schemes, and then eventually you get up to you get to the point where you have earned the President's Badge, which is it's the brigade president's badge, and it's presented by a president of the Boys Brigade, which is an appointed volunteer. And that is very much a product of, if you're in brigade for a long period of time and you try loads of things, if your brigade company is being well run, you should automatically get that award when you're 14, 15 years old.
Okay.
And then once you've achieved that, so once you've gotten the President's Badge, then you can do this course. And then the Queen's Badge is, it is 250 hours of volunteering outside of your brigade company in your community. So it's a significant volunteer commitment. And then there's a whole bunch of areas in much the same way as we have mental, physical, social, and religious. The Queen's Badge is broken down into things that are mental, things that are community-based, things that are religion-based, and things that are like sports, and things that are hobbies. And so you have to do so many hours of work in each of those 5 areas. So you would, a typical young person might take up a hobby like building model airplanes, and they would spend X number of hours building model airplanes, and then they would take up a sport, either with school or with their brigade company or with an outside thing. So they might play football or take up rugby or something along those lines, or swimming, or who knows. And then they have to accomplish so much in each of those 5 areas, and they have to continue doing their badge work with regard to brigade, so they keep achieving the awards that they're working on at brigade. And about 4% of all brigaders in the UK go on to get their Queen's Badge. So it's a rare thing, but considering that we have nearly 50,000 brigaders in the UK, there's some 3,000 or 4,000 Queen's Badge that gets issued every couple of years.
Compared to our only 2 recipients of.
But then we're drawing from a brigade organization of between 600 and 700 young people. They're drawing from a brigade organization of 50,000 young people.
Yeah.
So it's worth noting that the brigade here in Neenah is the largest single company.
Yeah.
But the reason that it's the largest single company is because we've kind of broken the rules about how many kids should be in a company before you would split it. And it just never happened that way in Neenah. So
realistically,
good, bad, or indifferent, it's just the way it is.
So realistically, this brigade should be split into different companies. If you're going by the
if you were going to go by the original founders' rules and the sizing guidelines that they have in the UK, there would be, and I don't know that it would necessarily operate any different. It's just it actually operates very much like that, because you have 5th and 6th grade boys on Monday nights, right?
Yeah.
So that acts like one brigade company.
Oh.
And then the girls act like another one. And then the Tuesday night boys and the Tuesday night girls, and the Wednesday night 9th graders and the Wednesday night 10th graders. So in reality, this brigade actually operates a lot like that. We just don't call it by the same names.
Okay.
And it just so happens that out of convenience, all 8 of our companies meet here in this building, as opposed to at 8 different churches around Neenah and Menasha, if that makes sense.
Do you know if there are any Boy Scouts prevalent in UK? Because I was reading about it, and there's World Scouting, and I was trying to get a number if the brigade outnumbers the Boy Scouts outside the world, outside of the US. Cause
interesting.
I
don't know the answer to that. I do know that there are Boy Scout companies operating in the UK. There are, and I think it's just because of size and attrition and everything else, there are many more Cub Scout groups operating in the UK than there are Boy Scout groups. But there are more I would guess there are more Cub Scout groups operating in the U.S. than there are Boy Scouts, because, like anything, you start out with a massive number of young people, and as you get older, and other things that go on, other things that go on, they attrit out, and they have other interests and stuff like that. So it's worth noting that if you research back into the history of the Boys Brigade and the research of Boy Scouts, the founder of Boy Scouts is a man named Baden Powell. And Baden Powell and Sir William Smith were very good friends. And Baden Powell was a leader in the early brigade movement and developed and pioneered what he called the scouting program for brigade, which was their summer camping program. So the Boy Scouts actually grew out of the Boys Brigade movement. And then Smith and the major difference in the UK there was that Smith and Baden Powell had a difference of opinion about how much of a role religion should play in the organization. So Baden Powell said, let's take the religion out of it, and so the Boys Brigade in the UK is very much for the most part, most companies are church-based units, and they're a bit of the they're at least a piece of the youth programming at a particular church. So it's probably a controversial statement that the Boy Scouts would be more or less happy to learn. But
Also, like, how much funding does like the UK get? Like, is it all non-profit? Is it some non-profit, like kind of like here?
yeah, brigade. The Boys Brigade UK is a charity in the UK, which is the same thing as saying it's a non-profit in the United States. So the brigade here is a non-profit organization, which means that it doesn't over the course of time make a profit per se. Any surplus that you might generate in your budget gets reinvested in the program and in the building, and there's nobody that's taking home a profit. There are people that take home a salary, but and yeah, all of the brigades in the UK are charities that either operate through their churches, like tax exempt status, or they have their own. Like the brigade I work for is a standalone charity. We have a connection to a church, but we are our own legal entity. So if the church were to ever close, our brigade company would carry on running, because we're a registered charity with the government of our accord.
I see. Is there a way for non-brigaders to help out with a brigade, like volunteer to help in certain programs?
So, like, not youth non-members or adult non-members?
Both.
Okay. Youth non-members, we occasionally, I can, now, on this one, I can only speak for Whittam Boys Brigade, the single unit that I work for in Whittam. We will occasionally take young people who are working on there's a national program similar to the Queen's Badge, for non-brigade kids called the Duke of Edinburgh's Award. And the Duke of Edinburgh is the next in line to the British throne, so he's the son of the Queen, the oldest son of the Queen. The Duke of Edinburgh, he runs this award scheme, and it's been going on for ages. And one of the requirements of that is, and most kids do that with their school, so while they're doing that, one of the things that they need to do is have so many hours of community service. So we will occasionally get a young person who will come in and basically be a co-leader for one of our brigade groups as a community service component of his Duke of Edinburgh Award. And that's a national non-brigade award, if that makes sense. And then as far as adults go, we might have an adult come in and give a presentation or teach something very specific. Like we had a lady come in and she taught all the boys how to sew a button onto a piece of cloth, so that if the button ever falls off their jeans or whatever, they could sew a new one back on. But in those circumstances, that individual would be paired with a registered brigade leader. So like one of the things that you'd find here at the brigade in Neenah and also at the brigade in the UK and probably brigades all over the world is that adult volunteers have to have a background check.
I see.
So there's a little bit of a limit to what adults can volunteer to do for the organization until you get a background check clearance for them to participate.
But is it possible for, like, say, a non-brigader would come here, a leader could come in and say, I would like to become a leader, and they could go through the background check and become a leader?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's not a requirement that you be, as far as I know, at any brigade anywhere, there's not a requirement that you have gone through the program. But like the brigade in the UK does have a leader training program. So if you came in from the outside and you didn't know anything about brigade, but you were like, I just want to volunteer and give back to my community, we would get you started on the leader registration process. In that process, there would be a background check, and an outside individual would go through leader training in order to be fully certified as a leader. So in the UK, we have like four different grades of volunteer. So we have a helper, who just shows up and doesn't have any particular certification other than the background check. And then you have a warrant officer, which is somebody who has completed the basic level training course. And then you have lieutenants who have completed almost all of the training courses bar one. And then the top level is captain, which is an additional training course. And it gives you the training that you need in order to be able to supervise and run an entire brigade company.
So how are the captains in the UK and other brigades around the world different from our captains here, such as Alex Johnson and what's her name?
And Marie Meltzer.
Yeah.
Yep. And now Alex has finished up his 3-year term. And Marie is finishing up her 3-year term in April. And Dan Kramer, who is the new boys captain that was appointed after Alex retired from his post. So the brigade here in Neenah runs a boys captain and a girls captain, and they're on a staggered 3-year term, so they're turning over every 3 years. Most brigade companies around the world operate on frequently if a brigade company gets started, a captain will start one.
Okay.
And will run it for a long period of time. So the brigade company I work for, its founding captain is a guy named John Boone. And he started the company in 1972, and he's still the captain of the company to this day. So he's got 46 years under his belt as captain. The difference here is the captain is a little bit of a ceremonial role, and they play, hi Connor.
Hi.
They play a role as a go-between between the board of directors and the volunteers and the paid staff, and get involved in some aspects of the program, and a little bit of that is based on what their interest areas and levels are. In the UK, the vast majority of brigade companies would have no paid staff at all. And the brigade captain would be the guy that's wholly in charge of the company. So the brigade captain is much more like the executive director here.
I
If
see.
that makes sense.
And then, have you been a captain here at the Neenah Brigade?
No.
Because I was gonna ask, like, what happens after a captain Neenah Brigade retires? Like, do they just become a leader again, or?
We take them out back and kill them. No, when a captain retires, their picture goes up on the wall and it just stays there forever. So if you go up outside the gym, you can walk down that hallway and you can walk all the way back to the far end of the building and you can find Sorensen's picture, who was the first captain. He wasn't the first captain of record, but he was the first captain that did a year term, or at least 1 year. The prior captain only did a couple of months, so he didn't get recorded as the first captain. But then for most of Brigade's history here, up to 1951, the second captain was a guy named S.F. Shattuck, who was hugely influential in the brigade and the whole town and everything else for 76 years. But he was captain for 17 or 19 years, something in that vein. And then after that, he said that was probably too long, so then they started doing 5-year captaincies.
Okay.
And the last captain to run the brigade here was a guy named Howie Angermeyer. And Howard's dad ran a plumbing business and essentially paid Howie to run the brigade for 5 years and didn't do any plumbing work. So his dad was very generous about that. But at the end of the 5 years, he said, "Brigade, the captain has become a full-time job, and the brigade really ought to hire a staff person." So the brigade here in 1951 hired Jack Casper as the brigade coordinator, and he worked here until he retired in 1987, I think 86 or 87. And then we've had an executive director ever since, and a number of paid staff.
All right. And with like, do the Australians visit the UK brigade anytime, or do other brigades visit the UK one?
There aren't any like official exchange programs for brigade, but there are brigade companies around the world that have private exchanges between the two companies, if that makes sense. Okay. So there's a brigade company in Scotland that has come here and visited, mainly during the summer camp season. We have the 10th North Beach Brigade that's here now from Australia, and they've come here. The 2nd Widham Boys Brigade that I work for has been here 5 or 6 times.